Hi, this is Abigail Joy with I Am Marketing. Today I have Christopher David. He is a former Uber driver and now CEO and founder of Arcade City. Christopher, can you please elaborate on Arcade City for me?
Sure. So Arcade City is a decentralized ride-sharing startup. We are aiming to decentralize the corporate sharing economy. $48 billion economy dominated right now by Uber. That's kind of our initial target. Had the idea for Arcade City while driving for Uber.
Nice.
20% of my customers asked how they could request me again.
Wow.
And it was against Uber's terms of service for me to get direct contact information, rider and driver. So Uber has kind of this, they talk a big game about empowering drivers to be entrepreneurs, but they actually treat them more like employees. And we said, hey, wait a second, there's this whole technology called the blockchain that we can use to actually disintermediate this relationship.
Right. Well, how does Arcade City integrate the blockchain?
So we just recently issued our Ethereum-based Arcade token, which we're going to use to incentivize riders and drivers for actions that grow the network. And then we're in the process of integrating MicroRaiden, which is a Ethereum scaling framework to tie programmatic distribution of our token out to drivers, say if they're online or if they're going into an area where there's increased rider demand, we'll pay them tokens in an increasing amount based on how useful it is. And then over time, we're going to be adding things like blockchain-based identification, self-sovereign identity, decentralized payment, reputation, and arbitration systems. Right now, the ecosystem isn't quite ready for those things to be in production, but we're having pretty good time just building rideshare networks in various cities around the world.
Right, you guys have a lot going on. It's very impressive. And what regulatory issues have you faced?
So we have had success thus far entering markets when Uber pulls out. Yeah. So our flagship network right now is in Austin. Okay. We moved, myself personally and the company headquarters, to Austin because there was just such a huge response when Uber and Lyft pulled out. 10,000 drivers were put out of a job overnight. And when we went there, I mean, the city of Austin, first they were kind of freaking out, like, hey, wait a second, like you didn't obey our rules and stuff. And eventually, they kind of came after us, but we explained to them, look, we're not a transportation network company. This is peer-to-peer. We don't have our own, contractor/employee relationships with drivers. They are actually their own independent entities. Right. And they were kind of sufficiently confused and, liking the fact that I was at least willing to engage them in conversation that they've left us alone for the past year. So Austin, we have that going in Austin. Wow. Philippines and some of the other markets we're starting to enter are taking a little bit harder of a line, but we're still operating, and it's an interesting dynamic of centralized corporate power or government power, which is accustomed to dealing with corporations. But if it's just a peer-to-peer network where the service providers can make their own choice about under what conditions they provide service, they're not used to dealing with that.
Yeah, and it's a lot more fair, I think, and it gives the drivers more power, which is what we want. Yeah. So you do have a really big market in Brazil and the Philippines. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. So Uber actually got suspended in the Philippines, a country of, I think, 100 million people, a few months ago. They were gone for 2 weeks, and so by that point we had our mobile app out, and so we had this flood of traffic. Drivers started to use our mobile app. Uber came back, that kind of died down, and then just a month ago the government suspended this Uber for motorcycles app. So in the Philippines, this extremely dense city of Manila, riders riding on the back of a motorcycle is like a big form of transportation, and there was an app that had hundreds of thousands of weekly users on it, and the government shut that down because it didn't obey their rules or give them money or something like that. And so all of these bikers now started to flood onto the Arcade City app. And so we're like, oh my gosh, this concept of empowering drivers, you can generalize that to empowering service providers. We have people in Austin that are already using our existing network to do peer-to-peer home sharing. We have about 5% of the requests in our Austin network are deliveries. So we've shown that once you kind of solve the problem of trust in peer-to-peer transactions for something as difficult as rideshare, which is like the hardest problem to solve, you can apply that same set to a bunch of different other service verticals. So we're saying that we are a ride-sharing startup, that's our initial focus, but the bigger picture is that we're decentralizing the corporate sharing economy more broadly.
Right, yeah, because I know that there's a lot of issues with Uber and Lyft, they have, drivers are doing inappropriate things or they're not following laws and stuff like that. So do you have some sort of system in place to make sure that your drivers are good drivers?
Yeah. So we let riders choose their driver. We let drivers set their own rates.
Oh, that's good.
But because we are decentralizing a lot of the decision-making power to the drivers and riders, we have drivers that are forming specialized pods of drivers. So for example, there's a group in Austin of all female drivers that is available for if you're a girl getting out of the club at 2 a.m.
Right, yeah.
Do you want to roll the dice and see if Uber's algorithm is going to pair you with a creeper who now knows
Exactly,
where you live,
yeah.
which they have problems with?
Yeah.
Or hey, there's like a friend of a friend on Facebook who's part of this female driver pod. That in combination with if you have a problem, you're not sending a support ticket to some outsourced HR. You're
Yeah.
like connecting with a friend of a friend on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's all community owned. We want to empower local communities of drivers.
That sounds like such a simple solution, and you would think that these big corporations like Uber and Lyft would think of that. So
Yeah.
that's
it goes
very
completely
smart.
against their model.
Right, exactly. So where will be the next target market, or will you continue improving on the existing market now?
So our app is available globally, and which is great because it lets us kind of test and see where the demand is.
Yeah.
Right now, the demand is highest by far in Brazil. We have, just on our very basic app that I coded myself,
Wow.
we have 10 cities in Brazil where there's already networks forming. Organically, we haven't promoted in Brazil at all.
Yeah.
So Brazil is Uber's second largest market. By the numbers, it's currently our number one largest
Yeah,
market.
that's amazing.
So we'll be going big in Brazil. We've got a team of like volunteer translators into Portuguese, or translating our app into Portuguese now.
Yeah.
We're excited particularly about South Korea. There's a lot of interest in blockchain technology and Uber alternatives in South Korea. We'll be going big there. Puerto Rico has a very unique situation where their transportation and energy grid has been completely decimated by the hurricane.
Right.
Areas where like the existing centralized services are underserving the population is where we're going to be like directing most effort. But the
awesome.
system is open, so if there is a driver in a remote area, one of the guys with us at this conference is in rural Iowa. He's like a solo driver. Uber is not there, and yet he's printed up business cards, he's gone into bars, he's promoted himself, he's gotten local media coverage with the headline, Arcade City brings ride sharing to the Cedar Valley before Uber. Like, oh my God, and we didn't pay anything
Yeah.
for that. Like,
Yeah.
can we get that multiplied by 1,000? Yes, there's no limits to it.
Right, and that's amazing. I mean, and I love the fact that you're going in places where they need the help, because these companies are just pulling out, so you're providing a solution. So you're actually making a great positive change in the world. So everyone who's watching, please follow his Twitter. It's Arcade City Hall, that's the company's Twitter. And then also, if you want to check out the website to learn more, it's arcade.city. Thank you so much, Christopher.
Thank you.
No problem.